Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan, this is Super Review, and this is the Dunu SA6 Mark II, which, as the name suggests, makes this the follow-up to the SA6 original, which came out back in 2020. But another way of looking at this IM is that it's kind of a re-release of the SA6 Ultra. And if you're not familiar with that one, last year Dunu and fellow audio reviewer Zeos collaborated to release the Ultra edition of the SA6, and it was surprisingly popular. It had a burst of just initial hype behind it that kind of quickly got disappointed when all 300 units that were made got sold out and Dunu said they weren't going to make any more. Except, they kind of did, because to a very large degree, honestly, the Mark II has a lot in common. This is very much a response to the popular demand for more Dunu Ultras. Like the Ultra, the Mark II that we've got here is an evolution of the original Dunu SA6 formula. It's still 6 balanced armatures. It's still kind of got a tastefully bass boosted neutral tune, and the shell design is kind of a custom, studio style shell, and it's still priced at under $600. It's $580 here for the Mark II. But what's different? Well, I've had this IM for the past couple of weeks. I've been listening to it and comparing it with the original SA6 to find out, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So like all my other reviews, this is a live stream. If you're here now in the live chat, how's it going? Happy Sunday evening. If you have any questions about the SA6 Mark II or anything else that we talk about, please leave it in the live chat and stick around to the end of the review, at which point we will have a back and forth conversation. But for now, we're just going to dive through the review. We'll talk about what comes inside the box, the physical stuff, the form factor, build quality. Then we'll get into talking about the sound, how this thing compares with some other IMs and its price range, and then I'll let you know my final conclusion and score. Before we get into all that though, just a quick shout out to Hi-Fi Go, who sent this IM in for review. If you want to check out the SA6 Mark II, I've got it linked in the description down below. And with that out of the way, let's jump to the table and start talking about the physical aspects here on the Mark II, including, well, let's talk about this box. It's a nice looking box. All right, we're done talking about the box. Actually, I don't know. I think Dunu's got pretty good graphic design chops, a little bit better than typical, and that does carry through to the IM itself. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Let's start first just by describing what comes inside this box. And as you can see on the table, it's quite a bit. You get a lot of accessories, which Dunu is usually pretty good about, and certainly no slouch here. So the case that you get here with the SA6 Mark II, it is this pleather sort of thing. It's got a really nice hinge on it. It's soft on the inside. Punch it in there so you can take a look. Yeah, this is a very nice case. Obviously, it's a little bit bigger than I would typically use for my portable usage, but no doubt it is attractive and quite well built. They do also include some other accessories. You've got a cleaning tool, or you could use that for brushing your eyebrows or something. They've got a couple of terminations, which we'll get into talking about this in a little bit. This is a 3.5 millimeter to 6.3 millimeter termination, and this is an adapter which works on the cable. We're going to talk about that more in a bit. I'll also call your attention to all of these dang ear tips. There are in fact 4 different styles of ear tips. So you should have no issues finding something that fits you. Let me pull a couple of these out and punch in on them so you can kind of briefly overview what's different about these 4 ear tips. So the obvious difference here, this is a typical foam ear tip, and that only comes in one size, but all the other styles come in 3 or 4 different sizes. This is kind of Dunu's standard ear tip that they've included in a number of their IMs. In fact, I have these that came with the SA6 original that I reviewed many moons ago. These ear tips, I like the shape of them. Like, they've kind of got this rounded dome to them, which is pretty good for locking into an ear. I would say my biggest qualm with these is that the silicone is not very grippy on them. So they end up not being my total favorites. This is sort of a newer style of Dunu ear tips, which, as you can see, is a shorter umbrella, less of that full rounded like mushroom top shape, and more of just a traditional dome. This actually fits a little bit more like a TWS ear tip, and to be honest, I actually like this. I think this has got a decent level of grip on the ear tip. As long as that fits well for your ear, well, it does for me, so I think that's a pretty good option. And then they've also included their new what I'm calling the Dunu Leanies. These kind of look like a pasta of some sort. They are a very unique ear tip, and if I'm perfectly honest, I don't love these ear tips, but I know a lot of people are pretty passionate about those ear tips, so it's nice that they're included in case that works for you. And that one does come in 4 different sizes, so hopefully you'll find something that works for you. But apart from that, what you get inside the box is the IM, and that will lead us into talking about build quality. And we'll start by describing this cable, which, like all of Dunu's cables, is a very extra and very well built cable. All right, let's see. Aesthetically, I think this thing is gorgeous, right? I love this deep silver color to it. That it catches the light pretty well. Build quality materials in this all feel very, very nice. It's got kind of like this dark metallic look, really nice hardware. As you can see, a nice svelte Y split here, a very functional chin slider, which I dig. And then of course, it's got Dunu's swappable terminations, which I alluded to before. If you wanted to make this thing a balanced cable, you can. By default, it comes with a 3.5mm termination, but you can swap it out for a 4.4mm balance, which comes inside the box. Interestingly, they're not including the 2.5mm balance anymore, but I don't know. I don't think that's such a big deal, because 2.5 kind of seems like it's going out of style. Behavior-wise, this cable is a little bit of a mixed bag. I do think that, as you can see, like it doesn't really hold memory in terms of like kinks and stuff like that. Like it looks quite tidy, and it roadie wraps really, really well, as you can see. But it is a bit of a heavyweight cable, and some people complain about the weight of the cable on the original SA6, and I don't know that this necessarily addressed those concerns. Just some people don't like a thick cable. Personally, I am kind of the opinion that I'm okay with the trade-off of weight for just something that feels really nice. Mostly what I don't like is you can see it's a little bit on the stiff and springy side. Again, it doesn't really end up being a problem in terms of its wrappability. It just doesn't quite feel as comfortable as a lighter weight, more flexible, softer cable, I suppose. Honestly though, whichever your preference is, I think it's kind of undeniable that the build quality on this cable is pretty stinking outstanding. And that's going to lead us into talking about these earpieces. And the original SA6, I gotta say, has some of the best earpieces, in my opinion, ever. Okay, they've got a gorgeous design and a medium small fit that is super comfy and stable, works really well for my ears, and works really surprisingly well for a lot of people. The Mark II, they changed some things, and that was kind of a risk, but they did it. Aesthetically, we'll start there. The aesthetics that they've gone for here on the Mark II is a slightly different direction. It is still kind of a wood outer. Let me show you both sides of it so you can see the difference in the wood grain patterns. It is like a wood pattern here. They've also done this interesting motif where they've got this little bit of orange. I don't know if this is also a wood or just kind of like a resin accent or something like that. What's notable here is that what you see on my IM is definitely not going to be what you get on your IM, because they're all just kind of random. In fact, even the depth or the darkness of the wood is pretty different from IM to IM. So it is a bit of a dice roll in terms of what exactly you will get when you get yours. Personally, I think this one actually came out pretty good. I think this one is a little bit lighter colored than I've seen on some of the other examples out there of the Mark II. And you know, as much as maybe this little bit of orange is kind of a weird thing, I think it's kind of a unique angle. I mean, maybe it's not as endearing or attractive as the fully stabilized wood that they did on the original SA6, but I do think this is a lot more interesting looking than most IMs, and I still think it's pretty handsome. It's just unfortunately that it's got to be compared to the original, which was again one of the absolute best shells ever made in an IM. Now, as for fit, they've actually also changed some stuff there, and that is what I find the most surprising, because again, the fit on the original SA6 is just stinking amazing. The earpieces here are, I would say, notably larger than they were on the original SA6, where the SA6 I would describe as kind of a medium small. This I would say is up to a medium large. It's still got kind of like this semi-custom design. You can kind of see all the molds and folds in this thing, so it locks into your ear. But I would say that the molding here on the Mark II is a little bit more aggressive. For me personally, it actually fits pretty phenomenally. It fills my ear. In fact, we'll give you a little bit of a fit demonstration. I would say this thing being a little bit bigger actually fills my ear a little bit more. And so because of that, the fit stability on this thing is just phenomenal, right? And I'm fortunate enough that the aggressive molding on the inside of that earphone fits really well with my ear. Now, that said, if you've got smaller ear holes than I've got, or the folds of your ear just don't quite match up exactly as the SA6 Mark II is asking, it might be a little bit more hit or miss. So just a little bit of a warning. But that said, this is really just, again, a very fantastic build quality that is only hampered because it has to be compared to its original, which was like literally one of the best physical form factors in an IM. And I think that's actually looking kind of cool with the light catching the 6 like that. So as you can see, it's a handsome IM, and fit is quite good. In terms of sound isolation, I would say that it is above average for sure, because it is, take that out of my ear, it sounds a little weird when I'm talking, because this is a full kind of solid resin IM, and because it's so opinionated and fills the ear, it will isolate and block out sound very significantly. In fact, probably even more so than the original SA6 because of the fuller build. But yeah, I don't know, not a high priority for me, but I know for some people that's important, so worth mentioning. And let me see, anything else that I wanted to talk about the build? I will briefly mention this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into talking about the sound, but there are switches here on the back of the IM that are used for changing the tuning of this IM. And what's notable about these is that they are operable by hand. You can just kind of quickly reach back and flick these. In fact, you can flick these things while they're still in your ears. So it makes it a little bit easier to do things like A/B test comparison, where I can just reach back here, flip the switch, change the tuning, and then flip it back and change the tuning again, I suppose. Yeah, so there you go. So that is all I can say about the physical stuff here on the SA6 Mark II. So let me roadie wrap this thing back into shape and start talking about the sound on this IM. Let's see, let's get it in a nice presentable position, get the light to catch just right. I think I screwed it up. There we go. There we go. That's pretty beautiful. All right, now let's talk about the sound quality on the Dunu SA6 Mark II. And like I typically do, I'm gonna start by describing the general sound signature, then we'll get into talking about what I like, what I don't like, and then we'll get into the comparison. So sound signature wise here on the SA6, just to put it into context, the original SA6 is kind of known as a good neutral benchmark. The Ultra edition, again, this is the one that came out last year that was quickly discontinued, that went for kind of a warmer, more extended treble sound. And the Mark II takes that direction of the Ultra even further, okay? Notably, the bass tuning on this IM is by default as bassy as the SA6 and the Ultra editions were with their switches on. So basically what this switch does is it increases the bass. And they had the same switch on the original SA6 and the Ultra edition. This one in the switch off position is as bassy as the Ultra is with the switch on, if that math works out for you. So yeah, it is significantly more bass boosted by default than the other SA6s. The upper treble here is, I would say, even more emphasized versus the Ultra, which was already a little bit more emphasized than the upper treble on, apologies, the original SA6, and the vocals are pulled back a little bit versus the original, which is very similar to what we had on the Ultra edition. So I would say that this overall comes across still as a mid-range focused sound signature. I would kind of describe it as a warm neutral, but you could also describe it as a U-shaped IM, where it's got emphasis in the sub bass, it's got emphasis in the upper treble, and then the mid-range is relatively flat. So what do I like about that sound here? And I'm sorry, I'm struggling to get this thing to bounce. Just give me the light catch. Give it to me. Give it to me. Oh, there we go. All right, I'm not gonna touch it. What do I like here about the sound on the SA6 Mark II? Well, just that tuning. It's excellent. It's excellent tonality, which is kind of what I come to expect of a Dunu SA6. The vocals come across really full and kind of a little bit lush versus overly forward like you got on some other IMs. Even versus the original SA6, I wouldn't describe as overly forward, but it is a more forward presentation, and this just kind of gives you that more laid back, again, kind of lush sound. The bass is boosted, but it doesn't intrude on the mid-range, at least with the default tuning. We'll get into talking about that maybe a little bit more later. But Okay, I'll just say right now, if you turn on that bass boost switch, I do think that it gives this thing a little bit too much bass, in my opinion. It starts to get a little bit distracting, but with the stock bass tuning, again, you get that sub bass boost emphasis to it without it really smearing up the mid-range at all. And just on that point, you have an overall clean mid-range presentation with, I think, an excellent sense of micro contrast. And what that means to me is that it's really good for vocal texturing and indexes high on a sense of detail throughout just the entire frequency range. And I think that is helped by very, very good treble quality. Like the original SA6, the treble on the Mark II is never sharp, it's never sibilant, never uncomfortable. The upper treble extension on this really does add a lot to that sense of micro contrast. Even though the original SA6 also did pretty well with the micro contrast, I think this one keeps that while having that more laid back tune, and that's pretty impressive. But also that extension in the high frequency adds a nice sense of weight to high frequency percussion. So I'm talking about, you know, a ride cymbal, just, you know, cymbals, hi-hats, stuff like that have a really nice solid metallic ping to them that this delivers really quite well. I've been listening a lot lately to this band called Pontabox. It's like Japanese jazz, and the metallic ping of the ride cymbal is really just quite fantastic here on the SA6 Mark II. And there is, again, some people might be a little bit adverse to that much upper treble emphasis, but I think it's pretty tastefully done. Just maybe a little bit of a risk of a sense of shimmer there, not a fatigue or anything like that. Just it can maybe sound a little bit unnatural with certain music. And then the technical performance on the SA6 Mark II is very, very solid. It's got solid definition, good separation between instruments. Imaging, I would say, is very good, but not necessarily standout. I would say it's perfectly adequate for the price. Again, $580, so we've got high expectations here. And head stage, I would say, is maybe a little bit wider than average, thanks to kind of that diffuse warm tilt to the sound signature, but it's also got that strong sense of clarity to the sound that helps that out. So that's what I like here about the Mark II. What do I not like about it? Apart from the fact that it won't catch the light. Catch the light, Dunu. Do it for me. Just do it for me. What do I not like about the sound here on the SA6 Mark II? Honestly, kind of just one thing, honestly. I like almost everything about this IM. The one thing I don't love about it is the bass. And with the original SA6, I called the bass kind of inconsistent. In some tracks, it was perfectly good bass with a solid sense of depth and rumble to it. And in other tracks, kind of came across a little bit flat and lifeless. And unfortunately, I kind of find that to be the case here as well with the SA6 Mark II. Whether it's because of the balanced armatureness of the bass, I don't know, or if it's because of the tuning, which is very much largely sub-bass focused. I'm not gonna lay the blame anywhere in particular. It's similarly inconsistent here. And I would say even at its best, the bass on the SA6 Ultra it's not especially tight. I would say it's below average in terms of definition on attack. And a sense of texturing. And it does contribute kind of an overall sense of dryness to the SA6 Mark II, which I think is also true of the Ultra as well as true of the original SA6. With that bass switch on, like I mentioned, I think it gets a little bit too much of it. You get more of those qualities I was just kind of describing, which in my opinion is not necessarily a good thing. I think the stock tuning would be my preference for the bass levels, but unfortunately, yeah, the bass is probably just, it's not bad bass, but it is definitely, if you're listening to this, it is the weakest part of the sound here on the SA6 Mark II. So those are my overall thoughts here on this IM, but of course we gotta put it into context. So I'm gonna pull in some competitors here, and we're gonna talk about how the SA6 Ultra stacks up versus them. Let me throw all of these accessories into this carefully crafted box and make room for our competitors. And I guess as I'm doing this, I can introduce them. So we just got done talking about this guy, the SA6 Mark II, 6 balanced armature IM as a reminder, $580. And well, all these IMs kind of are going to come in at around that. Here is the original Dunu SA6. Pull this guy up. This one was actually $550, a little bit cheaper, but also 6 balanced armature IM. Here we've got the Moon Drop Blessing 3. which is quite a bit cheaper. In fact, this is by far the cheapest one here on the table at just 320 bucks, and it's got 2 dynamic drivers as well as 4 balanced armatures. Here we've got the 7th Acoustics Supernova, which, if we're talking about an IM, it needs to catch the light. Look at that. Okay, the Dunu, the 7th Acoustics Supernova, also 6 balanced armatures, and price on this is around 750 bucks. And then finally here we've got the Symphonium Meteor, which is a 4 balanced armature IM that comes in at around 600 bucks. So you start to see some similarities. These are all balanced armature IMs at around 600 bucks. This one is the kind of difference here. This is a hybrid IM, and we'll get into talking about what that means for the sound. So how do they compare? All right, sound signature wise, the SA6 Ultra, like we just got done describing, this is neutral with a warm bassy tilt to it. It's got a relaxed mid-range, kind of an elevated upper treble. Versus the original SA6, I would describe this as neutral with kind of a warmish mid-range, but definitely a more forward mid-range than what you get here on the SA6 Mark II. It's got kind of the same sub-bass boost here, but again, it is a little bit less sub-bass boost. Although if you flip the switch up on here, it gets pretty similar to the bass boost here. The B3, the Moondrop B3 here. This is also a neutral IM. In comparison to these two, this is definitely going to come across thinner, a little bit more clinical, a little bit more sterile, and a little bit more forward in the vocal region. It's got a little bit of a sub-bass boost to it, but very much I would describe this as neutral in the bass. The 7th Acoustics Supernova, another flavor of neutral, and I know I'm kind of abusing the word neutral here because these all, if you listen to them back to back, they are significantly different. But the flavor of neutral here that I would describe is it's got kind of like a warm vocal presentation and a little bit of brightness in kind of the lower treble, but with bass that is fairly linear and extends well. But again, I would not describe this as necessarily a bassy IM, whereas here with the Symphonium Meteor, this one I would definitely describe as bassy. This is the most different in terms of tuning here. I call this thick, bassy. It's just a very warm, relaxed mid-range, but it does also have elevated upper treble, kind of similar to what you get here on the SA6 Mark II, but maybe even doubly so. And it's less of an all-rounder because of that. I would say, again, this one being the most different, it's a little bit more of a specialized sound, and these are all kind of decent all-rounders, but obviously that's going to depend on your preferences. If I were purely to rank these in terms of my preferences and tonal, that's actually tough. I've definitely put the Supernova as my favorite in terms of tonal preference, and then maybe the SA6 original, and then I don't know. Then these are probably pretty close. They're different tunes, but like on either side of my preference. And then this would probably be my least favorite, if just overall. But again, because it's kind of a specialty tune, it has its own gravity to me. But there you go. Now, in terms of technical performance, there's some more differences here. So the SA6 Mark II, I would describe as high on detail. It's got a solid sense of imaging, really excellent high frequency percussion timbre, right? Just that metallic ping that I was describing. Really the only downside on the technicalities here is just the bass is a bit flat and kind of dry sounding. The original SA6, a lot of that is also true. It's also, I would say, high on detail, similar sense of imaging, but the upper treble on this is a little bit tamer, actually quite a bit tamer. And because of that, I think the high frequency percussion doesn't come across quite as well as it does here on the Mark II. Bass-wise, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same deal, except there's maybe a little bit less of it depending on your setting. It is decent sub-bass focus, but a little bit dry and a little bit flat depending on the music that you're listening to. The Supernova, in contrast, I think this just really has a fantastic, the thing that stands out about the Supernova is the sense of timbre to it. Like just everything sounds really realistic and as it should. Just kind of like this transparency. It's got a sharp transience to it. I think next level imaging versus these. I think it stands out that the head stage and the imaging on the Supernova are quite a bit better. And it's got just a really well-defined attack, and like the bass hits really surprisingly well. It's got some physicality behind it that I don't really expect of balanced armature bass. The technical performance in this thing really does do better than I expect of this price range. And it stands out in this kind of comparison. The B3, I think I skipped over this one. Technical performance. The upper treble on this, I would say, is kind of in between these two, which does a good job of giving you that good sense of high frequency percussion, timbre, giving that metallic ping to it, but not quite to the same effect that you get here. The mid-range, I would say, is maybe a little bit less textured than what you get on either of the SA6s, but still really excellent in terms of transparency and just kind of that sense of resolution, like you're really looking through the music and seeing like the vocalists behind it. The bass is very light on this, as you'll see in a frequency response graph, and you'll definitely notice it when you're hearing it, but I think the quality on the bass is actually quite good. In fact, I would say this is probably the best quality bass of the bunch. It's dynamic driver, and that's part of why I'm saying that. But yeah, it's just really tight, good texture bass, got a nice springiness to it. There's just not a lot of it. And then finally here with the Symphonium Meteor in terms of technical performance, I think it has kind of a unique presentation to it. It's a little bit softer in the transients, doesn't index high in terms of separation. It's just more of like this full and cohesive sound. It's got, again, a really good sense of upper treble extension, which helps give it definition without sounding overly stuffy, given the other characteristics I kind of just described about it. I would say that the bass attack is kind of similarly a little bit soft, but it's got still a nice physicality behind it that is missing on the two SA6s. So there you go. If I were to rank these in terms of technical performance for my preferences, I mean, I think the Supernova would be the clear winner. These two trade blows, depending on kind of what you're indexing for. And then, yeah, like mid-range resolution, these are really good, but overall, I prefer just the kind of like the complete package here of the Blessing 3. And then the Meteor is, again, it's kind of in a league of its own. It's doing its own thing. It doesn't really compete in the same ways that these do, which you're either gonna like because it's just warm, laid back, punchy sound, or you're gonna not love it because it's not super well defined and super sharp in its imaging. And then finally, let's talk about form factor. So the Mark II, we just got done talking about this guy for a while. A medium large shell, it fits me excellently, but it fills my concha. So and again, it's got kind of an aggressive, let's make some space for that. It's a little bit aggressive in terms of its molding, so it may or may not fit you quite as well as it does me. I really quite dig it. Aesthetically, I think it's sharp, it's kind of mature, still an original look, but maybe not quite as nice as the original SA6, which this is actually not even its optimal form. Look at this side right here. This is like peak SA6. This might be the best fitting universal IM I've ever worn. It's a little bit smaller than the new Mark II, actually quite a bit smaller, and I don't know, it's fantastic. Maybe not quite as stable as the new one, but it's just a little bit easier of a fit. It's less aggressive in its molding, so I think it'll fit more people a little bit better. And the aesthetics on this thing are, I think, kind of legendary at this point. They just did a really good job with the stabilized wood. Although, again, it's a little bit of an RNG IM in terms of what you get might not be exactly what you were hoping for. The Blessing 3, again, this is the cheapest here on the table by like half. But build quality is actually still really quite good. Fit-wise, I would describe this as kind of a medium large shell, so more similar to the SA6 Mark II. It's less opinionated than those IMs though, so it might not be as aggressive inside of the folds of the ear as the SA6s, but it is still relatively large to fit. As far as aesthetics, I think it's kind of a simple look to it, but I really do. I like the clear resin, being able to see those balanced armatures and the dynamic drivers and the construction of it really clearly. I dig that. I just don't love the fact that it is quite a fingerprint magnet. Will lead us into talking about the Supernova, which I would also describe as kind of a medium large shell. Although this is the least custom molded of the bunch, as you can see, it still fits me really pretty excellently. Fit stability on this thing is fantastic, and the ingress egress is maybe even a little bit easier because it doesn't have those fins, just at slightly the cost of fit stability versus something like the Blessing or the SA6s, but really quite a good fit for me. Aesthetically, well, this is where this thing is kind of special, again, in a lot of ways, but it's got this abalone design on the outside, and what's kind of cool about this is during the ordering process of this, you get to work with the guy building it, and he'll show you a bunch of different designs that you get to pick from. It's like, hey, this is the abalone that's in stock, which one do you like? And he'll put it on your IM, and that's exactly what he did for me, and it makes that one kind of special. in a way. I mean, the Meteor is also special in a way, but I would say build quality wise, this is probably the the least impressive of the bunch. It is the smallest of the bunch, so if you're worried about fit, I don't think anyone will have anything to worry about the fit here on the Meteor. This is quite a compact IM. It's also, I would say, the least stable fitting. You can see that it doesn't have any sort of custom molding at all. And mostly this thing is going to interact with your ear canal, and the rest of the IM will float around inside your concha, which means it's not necessarily the most stable fitting IM, but I don't really have any issues with it, especially in terms of comfort. Very, very solid. I would say aesthetically, it is probably the weakest point here on the Meteor. I mean, if it was just the red shell, it's got this aluminum build, I would be okay with that. But the print on it, as you can kind of see, the way it catches the light is just a little, there it looks good. And then here it like turns weird black and mushy. I'm not sure exactly what that is all about, but that is going to lead me into the conclusion of my review here on the SA6 Mark II. Overall, like the original SA6, this is a fantastic IM at the price. I would say that the bass lets it down a little bit, but it delivers something pretty unique, right? It's got this warm, laid-back tune that is mostly mid-range, mostly neutral. That you don't have to sacrifice, you know, that laid-back, relaxed tune, and you don't have to sacrifice bass quantity to get a neutral tune with a nice mid-range focus. But unfortunately, the bass quality is a little bit of a lackluster here. Overall, still, I'm going to give it a very solid 4 stars out of 5. And if you want to check out the SA6 Mark II, of course, I've got it linked in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and join me on Discord. I've also got my Discord server linked in the description. I'm about to have a conversation with some people live here. If you're not live and you missed this conversation, well, the Discord is the place where we carry on the conversation. So join me there, and I'll catch you on the next super review. Have a good week.